One of the most ironic things about being a writing teacher is that the easiest things to teach aren't the most important parts of the writing process, and the most important parts of the writing process are extremely difficult to teach. Things like where to put a comma, or even what a thesis statement ought to look like, or how to use punctuation and grammar and mechanics, those are pretty easy to teach and they're pretty easy to learn, but they don't make a great paper. The most important part of a paper, as we've talked about before, is the idea that governs the paper. A bad idea simply cannot produce a good paper, though a good idea can very often produce a bad paper. And at the end of chapter 9 in World of Ideas, I talk about what I think the most important part of a good paper is, and that is this thing called subtlety. And it's a hard concept to define. I'm sure you've heard the word. In the way that I use it in this course, it means something like that property of the paper that distinguishes it from other papers and makes it a unique and good idea. So what's the difference between a subtle argument and a non-subtle argument in practical terms? Look at the following two thesis statements, and I'm going to break one of my cardinal rules of being a writing teacher, which is never talk about abortion because nobody can be rational or think about it logically on either side. But this is just for illustration. Both of these statements are pro-life arguments. Argument one, abortion is murder. People who permit or perform abortions are taking human life, and that is what murder is. Well, that's the pro-life position in a nutshell, and that's what almost every eighth grader in the country, if asked to write a paper against abortion, is going to say. It's not a subtle argument, it's an overbearing argument, it's a cliched argument, it's the equivalent of the mummy roaring in the desert. Argument two, and this comes from an actual philosopher, a philosophy paper that I read when I was in college. The primary wrong-making feature of a killing is the loss to the victim of its future. The future of a standard fetus includes a set of human experiences, projects, activities, and such which are identical with the futures of human beings. That's a subtle argument. That's the mummy popping open its eyes. That is somebody who has looked at the topic and gone beyond the first inclination to say what everybody else says, and to come up with a unique spin, a unique frame for talking about the topic. Argument one is cliche. Argument two is subtle. Much of your success as a college writer will depend on your learning the difference. So here they are, Dr. Austin's patented 6 steps to subtlety from chapter 9 of Reading the World. These are 6 steps that, if you take them and think about them seriously, should help you have better ideas that will produce better papers. Step number 1, go beyond your first ideas because they're going to be the same as everybody else's. When I was in college, I used to spend about a half an hour for every paper assignment I got. Write down everything that came to my mind in a half an hour, pin that up on a bulletin board, and make sure that I didn't say a single thing in my paper that occurred to me during the first half hour of thinking about it. That's because that's going to be all that most people think of. And one of the things you have to do as a writer is demonstrate that you're thinking beyond what most people who write about your topic are thinking. So keep thinking until you come up with better ideas. Second, go beyond the standard positions as you imagine them to be. If you're writing about economic and moral progress, go beyond the easiest arguments that come to mind. Economic progress is different than moral progress because economic progress really only worries about money. Well, yeah, perhaps, but that's the obvious argument. Keep at it until you come up with something that's not obvious. 3, avoid cliches. And a cliche is just an argument that was good once but has been used so often that it's not good anymore. If you're talking about gun control, don't say guns don't kill people, people kill people. If you're talking about economic progress, Don't say money can't buy happiness. Don't make the kinds of arguments that have simply become part of the standard repertoire of arguments on whatever topic that it is that you're thinking about or that you're writing about, because those are going to be in every paper, and those are going to get you defined inherently as average. If you do what everybody else does, you're average, and average in college means C, C+. Step 4, take the counterintuitive position. That means go against the grain. If you're writing about economic and moral progress, again, everybody is going to say that economic and moral progress aren't the same things. Can you think of a way to say that they are? Can you think of a way to say that economic progress really does drive moral progress? If you can think of a way to say that and say it convincingly, you're going to instantly set yourself apart. And if you instantly set yourself apart, you're going to be graded on a whole different standard than everybody else is graded on. So if you have what looks like an obvious topic or a topic with an obvious answer, find a way to take the other side. Consider all of the implications of an argument, and by this I mean consider what's underneath the argument. If you're arguing about affirmative action, you could say we should do affirmative action or we should not do affirmative action for whatever reasons, but underneath that are some assumptions about the effectiveness of affirmative action, the political viability of it, and if you go beneath the arguments and get to the assumptions that the arguments make, you're almost always going to write a better paper. Finally, keep going until you've learned something. If you haven't interested yourself in your topic, you are almost certainly not going to interest me or any other teacher. Because until you have something to say which you find compelling, interesting, until you find something to say that teaches you something you didn't know before, then it's very unlikely that anybody else is going to be interested by the topic. So keep going until you've learned something, or at least keep going until you've said something that you find interesting. If you find it interesting, that's no guarantee that I will, but if you don't find it interesting and you wrote it, that's almost a certain guarantee that I won't. So that's the lecture for today. No bulletin board assignment, because I want you working on your papers, but try to take this, and your bulletin board assignment really will be your paper, and whether or not you bring in these concepts of subtlety to the argument that you make in your paper. So go over these points, read over them again in your textbook, and then write a paper which has a better idea than you had when you started out. That really is your assignment for this week. Good luck.